Stream is live.
We're live.
Welcome, everybody. This is a live stream with me, Stephanie Chilinsky, and Dr. Bill Stodden. We are the presidential ticket for the Socialist Party USA in 2024. And we're really glad that you can join us today because there's a lot of important stuff to talk about. So like I said, I'm Stephanie Chilinsky. My pronouns are she, her. I'm here in Minneapolis, and I've been a party member for about 20 years. Go ahead, Bill. Oh, can you hear us?
Okay, my name is Bill Stodden, and I am... Oh, yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Oh, okay. Yes, my name is Bill Stodden, and I am the presidential candidate for the Socialist Party USA. I've been on and off with the party for about almost 25 years, and our campaign is designed, I think, especially to try to talk about socialism and get the real truth about socialism out there, rather than allowing people to simply just misrepresent socialism. Tell people what socialism is. Tell people how to join the Socialist Party. Tell people the things that we can do when we join the Socialist Party and work together, and make links with left wing groups, unionists, unions, activists, and other types of folks on the left who would be interested in possibly working together for unity. So today we decided we were going to do a live stream just to kind of discuss what's going on in the world. And we started planning this back in the day when the biggest news was the Supreme Court deciding that the president was absolutely immune from any kind of prosecution for anything. But since then, some things have happened. There's been a shakeup in the Democratic primary process, or the Democratic presidential process, and of course there's an ongoing housing crisis, which we feel that we should probably be addressing too. So Stephanie, if you want to start with what you were thinking about for the Supreme Court and their efforts to make the president immune from any sort of prosecution, and we can go from there.
Well, there were a couple decisions, pretty monumental decisions made. I mean, I'm no legal scholar. It's hard to tell what their plan is with this. I mean, they have put out the Heritage Foundation has put out their plan, and my thoughts are they're going to try to get as much rammed through as quickly as possible, because when Reagan took office, they had a similar plan, and that's exactly what they did. And we are still living with the damage from his administration, just even the first couple months of his administration, much less the whole thing. But I do want to point out that, I mean, presidents have never been prosecuted, really. I mean, they are already held to a standard that is at least somewhat above the law. So, and that doesn't mean that the decision itself isn't meaningful, but the thing is, we should recognize that the system is already corrupt, and this is almost just recognizing how corrupt it is and making it a little more legal. I mean, we've seen how Supreme Court justices can basically be bribed for like with Clarence Thomas, and that it's completely illegal. And when people talk about corruption, they often mention that the United States is relatively free from corruption, which is, I guess, technically true, because lobbying is legal and bribery is legal. And when you make things legal, maybe it's not corruption. But I mean, to me, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's not corrupt. I mean, they are making decisions that go against what Americans want and what's best for everybody. That's and they're doing it because the elite are bribing them. That is corruption in my mind, even if it's legal or not. But we'll just have to see where they expect to go with this.
Well, another thing that people were talking about, what they were worrying about, was that this would give the president the unfettered authority to say, well, this person is a threat to the republic, therefore we need to dispatch SEAL Team 6 out to kill them, that kind of thing. And as Stephanie mentioned, these are things that the president already had the sort of had the power to do. It's just he was never ever held accountable for any of it. Now that it's out in the open, people are a little bit more afraid of it. But I think that they're only a little bit more afraid of it because they start coming to understand that it could happen to them rather than these other people. I mean, we can look back. It was over 100 years ago, as a matter of fact, when Eugene Debs, who was our candidate for president in 1920, among other years, was thrown in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary for speaking out against the war and encouraging people to not go and enlist or to accept the draft to go fight the war. The war was well over when he was finally thrown in jail, and he stayed in jail through the 1920 election. But the thing is the president had the power to do that, and the president had the power to pardon him, and the president refused to pardon him as long as Woodrow Wilson was in office. As soon as his replacement, I believe it was Warren B. Harding. Don't quote me on that. I think he's the person that replaced Wilson. But as soon as he took office, then he finally let Debs out of jail because it was such an egregious violation of people's civil rights and freedom of speech that a Republican president, Warren G., had to let him out of jail. And if I'm wrong about who that president is, I will be very embarrassed. But I think it was Warren G. Harding. But at any rate, the president has secretly or more openly ordered the deposing of several governments around Latin America and the Middle East and Africa. They've sent special forces in to overthrow governments by force, or they've sent the CIA in to pull all kinds of weird tricks to influence elections or guide the people in a country away from supporting their government more towards supporting military dictatorships. And the president has done that with impunity for as long as we've been a republic, pretty much. And so the idea that the president now just suddenly has the power to get rid of their political enemies is facetious. People are only paying attention to it because they think that it could happen to them or someone they know, rather than just some random strange or a far out extremist like a socialist who they've never met before. Now it could suddenly happen to them because this guy Trump is that much of a wild card that all of a sudden he's going to do something that he's always had the power to do, but he's going to do it openly. And I think that's what people are worried about. Now, real quick before I move on from this thing, I don't think it's unreasonable to be worried about it necessarily, but people should have been worried about it all along because it's been happening to people this entire time. It's just because it doesn't happen to you or someone. Socialist is a lifelong socialist, Oh, did we? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. We're blinked out.
Are you breaking up a little bit?
Yeah, we blinked out there for a second. I don't know what happened, but yeah, as a lifelong socialist, this is something that we've always had to worry about. So, that's basically what the Supreme Court does.
Yeah, well, and I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that one reason socialists should always be on the side of free speech and against government crackdowns, even ones that supposedly are going to target the far right, is that we are always on the bad end of this. These laws are often, I mean, the reason we are getting kicked off the ballot, the reason for gun control, even with the Black Panthers, it's often to target grassroots leftist movements and worker movements, never the far right, because that's just never how it works. And truth be told, I mean, I know, obviously Biden's not the candidate anymore, but he was talking about everything he's going to do to save democracy if he's reelected. But I'm confused though, because I mean, why isn't he doing this now? They have the Senate and they have the White House, because Republicans are perfectly able to pass all sorts of laws and get all sorts of things done, even when they don't have a majority. But the Democrats just can't seem to get that done. And, that doesn't make a lot of sense until you remember the Democrats are one of the parties that serves the ruling class. So they do. And basically what you have with the Democrats and Republicans is two versions of the same thing. One is a kinder, gentler version, and there are differences, especially on social policy, but economically they're very similar, if not the same. And the fact is, Democrats don't pass these things, and they don't take decisive action on protecting democracy while they kick us off the ballot. Because they don't want to. You know, they definitely could do all the things that the Republicans are doing to get their stuff passed. They just don't.
Right. And, you know, it was a talking point, earlier this year when the Democrats supposedly offered a bipartisan agreement on immigration because immigration has suddenly become a huge thing for the Biden administration. They want to out-Republican the Republicans. And then they were complaining that the Republicans wouldn't support their immigration policy. And it was revealed that that no less than Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for president, informed his congressional allies, don't vote for this because then you'll take it off the table. And we want to run on it this year. And we want to hit Biden over the head with it this year. No mention of the fact that Biden has actually deported more people this year than Trump ever did in his whole 4 years. Biden has actually surpassed the all-time record for deportations with or without any kind of thing. Yeah, right, which was set by Obama. So Obama did all these deportations, and Trump did, Trump shut the border down, so he didn't have any immigrants to deport, apparently. And then when Biden offers a bipartisan plan, then Trump shuts it down because they don't want to take the issue off the table. And the Democrats are wringing their hands and clutching their pearls about all this stuff, but they do the same thing. You know, they could have protected a woman's right to choose back in the 1990s or the 2000s when they had supermajorities in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. However, they chose to waste their time on a giveaway to the insurance companies called the Affordable Care Act. And they wasted all their political capital, and they created a whole bunch of people who were really upset with them that were also being stoked by the far right libertarian anti-tax folks, which is, I mean, it's like a game for these people. I mean, they really don't actually want to solve any problems. And when you actually take a look at the quote unquote solutions that they give for the problems that they have, the solutions that they give aren't actual solutions to the problems. Like, for example, the student loan crisis, which you could bring in here too, since that was struck down in the Supreme Court. That wasn't really a student loan forgiveness program. Actually, it was a means tested program that was designed to forgive partial student loans under COVID era powers of the president or whatever. So they means tested it, and predictably some rich kid decided to whine and cry about how it didn't apply to her. But conservative money behind her took the thing all the way to the Supreme Court. And predictably, the Supreme Court says, yeah, we're not going to allow you to do that because we don't want you to do that thing. Well, Biden knew that was going to happen. Everybody around Biden knew that was going to happen. I mean, I'm sitting in Iowa listening to this program where he's talking about we can forgive up to $10,000 of student loan. And first of all, that's like 1/20th of my student loans. That's like 5% of my student loans, which, would have been something. But to me, that's like a drop in the bucket. I have 2 mortgages for student loans, but at any rate, we knew that it was going to happen, that they were going to take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was going to say no to it. So if I knew it was going to happen when I'm sitting here in the middle of Iowa, why didn't Biden's administration know that it was going to happen? Well, he did. And he also knew that it was going to get struck down in the court. So at that point, he can say, well, I guess we tried. We tried. It's those horrible conservatives that did it. You have to vote for us to get those conservatives out of the way. If you like student loans, you got to vote for us. But, even if everybody in the whole world voted for the Democrats, they still wouldn't strike down student loan payments. They still wouldn't forgive all student loans because, as you mentioned, Stephanie, very correctly, they're in the service of capital. And as a matter of fact, it's Biden's predecessors in the Democratic Party that, number one, made money very, very cheap for everyone to get loans and get tied into banks. Number two, made it illegal for you to file bankruptcy, or impossible for you to file bankruptcy to get your student loans forgiven through the bankruptcy system. So it's like a 1-2 punch. They're just basically guaranteeing that we're going to be in the service of these banks and these financiers for the rest of our life. And anything that they do that even looks like it might provide us some relief from that, they have to do it in such a way where it's going to immediately be erased by the courts, so then they can then run on it, for the next election.
I have some good news for you, Bill. It looks like the Heritage Foundation is going to eliminate the Department of Education, who does control your loans. So, if they don't have a Department of Education, maybe you won't have loans.
Well, if the Heritage Foundation is able to accomplish that, the Heritage Foundation has the ability to sell those loans off to Chase Manhattan first.
I know that's not what they're going to do with it, but one can dream.
Yeah, one can dream. Do we have any questions in the chat here? I'm not seeing any questions right now. If anybody has any questions, feel free to write them in there, and we'll try to address them. One was it Gender Fluid Bunny Time says Biden be bragging about how border control supports him was disgusting. Yes, indeed. The idea that Biden is complaining is saying that he is really tough on immigration is laughable.
Not because he's not, though.
Not because he's not.
He is tough on immigration.
Yeah, but because that's not really that good a policy.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's not. It's not the flex that he thinks it is.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you with how they handled that bipartisan bill. Bipartisanship with fascists, I guess. Bipartisanship with the people you're going to save democracy from. That the Republicans don't care if it passes, and the Democrats don't care about their promises to protect migrants. It's all just political pawns to move around to try to get power for one or the other, but ultimately they're serving the same purpose.
Right. Amy actually asked a question which can help us segue into our next section. Amy Swank asked, do you think that Kamala is less genocidal than Biden, and why? So let's kind of talk about Netanyahu today. How would you answer that question, Stephanie?
It would be hard to be more Zionist than Biden. So I'm going to have to say yes. It's been disheartening seeing ever since the announcement that he stepped down. Everyone's posting the I'm with her stuff. Like people I thought that were relatively even progressive or maybe even socialist getting behind her, which I don't even know what to say about that. She is a perfect representation of the Democrats, being a woman who's multiracial and a cop, So I guess so, but I really would be surprised if there's any substantial change in our policy. Right now, as we speak, there is a massive protest outside my door by Amy Klobuchar's office. And I don't know if there's any way for me to show this video, but there are about 20 cop cars and a bus. So I suspect they're going to be trying to do mass arrests. So.
Wow, that's interesting. I think it's really... I think it's really interesting about Kamala. I'm not necessarily sure about genocidal. I personally think that she's going to follow lockstep with the Democratic Party's policy. I don't think that she's any more or less genocidal than Biden. I just think that they're products of the same machine. And so I think that we can pretty much expect that the policies from the federal government with regard to Israel, supporting Israel's receiving 500-pound bombs and all kinds of money from us to help prosecute this war. Israel, basically, thumbing their nose at the United States when the United States claims to want peace and that kind of stuff. I think that's pretty much going to be the same under Kamala Harris if she wins, as opposed to Biden. But I think it's really interesting with regard to domestic policy, because a lot of the things that Harris did when she was the Attorney General for the state of California are really they're really not very progressive. I think it sort of winds back all of the social justice and defund the police or reform the police or however you want to say it movement of the early 2020s, simply because of the fact that the things she was jailing people for were like, your kid didn't go to school for 6 days or something like that, so you violated the truancy law, so you send the parent to jail. Like, she would brag about stuff like that. Like, look at these parents who I prosecuted vigorously. Didn't have to, but I chose to just to show that it's really important for kids to go to school. So that's how you do it. You send the parents to jail. Well, I mean, I don't know about the laws, but like growing up, I remember when they passed a law in the state of Indiana that said if your kid misses X number of days of school, he's considered a truant, and the parent goes to jail. And that's the kind of laws that Kamala Harris was bragging about jailing parents under. She also jailed people who were in possession of small quantities of marijuana. She was really, really hard on the marijuana laws and the marijuana prosecutions in the state of California. And she did it like it wasn't even like something that she was embarrassed about. She was like gleeful about it, and that's why she got a reputation for being a very, very tough DA, which kind of it kind of undermines the whole claim to actually care about people or be this this progressive minded person or whatever the case may be. In fact, she's just a law and order type of person who happens to be a Democrat because that's maybe that's where she grew up at or something. I don't even know. But I would say she's probably more vigorous with prosecution of the law for even stupid little offenses like that than Biden would have been had he been in the situation. So while people are really happy that the Democrats seem to have finally, after 40 years, made a decision that is possibly a good thing for their own survival as a party, as opposed to the thing that they did for the last 40 years, which is basically undermining their very reason for existence. They finally made it one decision, and so people are like, Kamala's the second coming. We got to keep that in perspective because it doesn't really matter how good or bad a person is. If they're running for the Democratic Party, they're still in support of capitalism and imperialism. And this is a very, very good contrast between where we are and where probably most of the people in this chat are and where the Democratic Party is.
Well, and I have to say, obviously the argument is for vote blue no matter who, because of the really real threat of fascism and the Project 2025, which is incredibly scary. But of course, we have a system where, at least in my lifetime, the Democrats decided that their policy or their strategy was going to be to keep moving to the right. They adopted neoliberalism whole hog. And they were hoping to sweep up the moderate Republicans that might fall off as the Republicans kept lurching to the right. So we have a two-party system, and we have one party that's lurching to the right and one party that's kind of trailing behind, picking up the scraps. So where are we going to end up with two parties that are going far to the right? We're going to end up where we are right now. And they both also decided that their rhetoric was going to be about a culture war instead of a class war, because they've really doubled down on, they want to talk about immigration. They want to talk about trans people. They want to talk about things that really don't affect most Americans unless they're in the group that's being targeted. But trans rights, if you're not trans, and immigration policy, if you're not an immigrant, well, I guess it would affect you if your neighbors are being deported. Oh, shoot, did I just mute myself?
No, you're good.
I thought I muted myself because it said mute. My mic is muted. But they're distracting us from the very real way all of us are getting our pockets picked by corporations. And it isn't just low wages. That's one thing. But they're also consolidating to the point that these industries have almost complete monopolies now. And that's a major reason prices are so high. And well, so many things are wrong with supply chains. And I mean, it's on one hand, it's nice almost to see capitalism eating itself, but unless we replace it with something, things are just going to get worse and worse for working people. But the Democrats have a lot of the blame for why we're at where we're at. And if they did want to change things, they could. What they will do is they will campaign on, less and less progressive promises, it seems, over the years, and fail to deliver on any of them. And you can see how people on the left are just so excited for anything to see how they did act like Kamala was like the next best thing. It's like, what are you seeing here that I'm not? I mean, at least Obama did actually have some good rhetoric as far as reforming and like actual progressive policy. She doesn't even have that. So, I mean, they've just fallen so far. And I think to defeat fascism, you're not going to do it with neoliberalism. You would need like left populism at the very least, because their rhetoric just does not bode well when it comes to countering fascism. You need an actual working class movement to do that.
Yeah, and I also would like to caution people against like taking the easy, low-hanging fruit when you're going against. I mean, calling Biden old, for example, was, in my opinion, very low-hanging fruit. Yeah, he was old, but he can't do anything about that. Like, he's been old for like decades. I think we could blame the voting public for electing an old guy like that into the office, but Biden can't do anything about the fact that he's old. The fact that he's a genocidal warmonger, neoliberal, he can do something about that. And the same with Kamala. I mean, it's very easy to point out that Kamala, is kind of goofy sometimes. Like, she has a strange sense of humor, and apparently my son informed me that Gen Z really loves the whole thing about the coconut tree. As an older man, I sort of don't get it, but people like what they like, but I mean, that's kind of low hanging fruit. The fact that, as Amy pointed out, and other people have backed up here, the fact that she bragged when she was running for president in 2020 about keeping poor and black men in jail extra long after their sentence is over because the state of California was getting cheap labor out of them, or cheap or free labor out of them, is the truth. She did brag about that, because I remember being struck by that fact, that she was bragging about this fact. And then people will go along and, as another one of our guests here, Jennifer Fluid Bunny Time, thank you again, said that they mentioned that and got called a bigot for it. And I mean, it's like saying the truth. So like, is it bigoted to point out the fact that some of her policies, some of her actions as a DA were straight up monstrous? That's not bigoted at all. You're not actually attacking anything about her identity or anything like that. What you're doing is saying that when it came time to make a good policy decision, she chose the bad policy decision. When it came time to stand up for peace, either in Ukraine or in Gaza, she voted and pushed for more war and more money for war. None of these people, I mean, you don't get to that level by being clean. I'm sorry. None of these people, you don't get there. You just don't get there by being straight up and honest. Like, you got to do some really dirty stuff. And I don't know about Kamala. I don't know a lot about her. She was a DA, and then she became like a senator, and then she became the vice president. I mean, it's a fairly meteoric rise. Not saying that she didn't deserve it or earn it or anything like that within the context of the Democratic Party. I'm not making any other claims. I'm saying that looking at her policies, looking at the policy choices she has, number one, she doesn't have a really strong record while she was the vice president. The only thing I really remember her doing is going down to Latin America and telling people who were coming to the United States because they were in war, or they were getting attacked by gangs, or they were in like crazy like generational poverty and were looking for a better life. They were going to stay there, to not even come up here because they were going to be sent back. Like, she went down and said that, and it was touted by people like on MSNBC as if this is like this really gutsy thing that she's saying. Like, this is really, she's really like telling it how it is, and this is the kind of person we want, and everything like that. But in reality, it's a very cruel statement of policy. It's honest, at least. I mean, that's good, but it's very cruel. It's a very cold statement of policy. You're not welcome here, is what she's saying to thousands and tens of thousands and maybe millions of people who might be looking for a better life in this country, the kind of life that I, as a white male, straight white male, was born into by sheer luck of the lottery. That's what those people want, and that's what those people will work their ass off to get. And she's telling them, don't even bother, because we're going to send you back. I mean, that's a very cruel policy, and we can point to probably 15 things if we go through a record where it's very, very similar. The tone is just similar. It's just cruel. And it's not humanistic. It's not caring. It's not empathetic, and it doesn't address any of the causes either. And this is really important, I think, to point out. None of the solutions or none of the policies that these guys are offering address any of the causes of the reason why all those people are wanting to come up to the United States in the first place. None of those causes are being addressed, especially the legacy of imperialism. The United States was responsible for overthrowing government after government and putting in corrupt military dictators and narco traffickers down there in Latin America, which turned into gang wars and causing people to have no job security, no money, no clean water, no clean environment, none of that stuff. None of that stuff is being addressed by any of these really cruel policies. And I think those are very legitimate things to hit both Biden and Kamala Harris on. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to mention, so, I mean, it really boils my blood that, I mean, there are a lot of racist attacks on Kamala, and I don't support any of that. And I don't care where you stand. It's not okay. The DEI thing, especially,
and sexist attacks too, by the way.
Yeah, it's both. It's always both. Fascism seems to love misogyny and white supremacy. It's like candy to them. But they want to get people to the point where they see someone who's a woman or who isn't white, and they see them in a position of power, and they automatically assume that they couldn't have earned it, which is a horrible thing. If they succeed at that, it's going to be a horrible thing for all of us. But I wanted to mention, if you are interested in learning about actual intersectional socialist feminism, not this where they say that being called an imperialist for doing imperialist things is racist, which is just absurd. I would suggest registering for the Socialist Party USA National Organizing Conference, because we are going to have a panel where we talk about this, where we talk about how what we need is actual feminism that has class consciousness. We don't need to only focus on class and pretend like none of the other forms of bigotry and oppression and systemic racism exist. And we also don't need the liberal feminist where what they want is for them to be more women oppressors and more people of color who are oppressors, and completely ignoring class, which makes the entire thing nonsensical, because class is obviously one of the most prevalent forms of oppression. And capitalism. Oh, hey, Joshua.
Bill, you're muted.
Oh, I was talking.
Yeah.
But yeah,
sorry.
The NOC, the National Organizing Convention this weekend. Make sure to register in advance, and you can learn more about that. And if you like what you hear, either on the stream or on that convention, you could read our principles, and if you agree, consider joining the party. Because the only way we're going to change anything is if we do it together. When we act alone, it isn't very effective. We have to work together, and we are a multi-tendency party. So as long as you agree with our principles, you're pretty much good to go. But if you have any questions, Bill and I would be happy to answer them.
We're going to actually welcome Josh now to the conversation. Josh is one of our fellow candidates in the Socialist Party. He is running for city council in the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. So he's a good Southerner and a good socialist. Welcome aboard, Josh.
Thanks, comrades. Yeah, sorry I'm late. My computer had to update, so it took like 39 minutes.
What's your take on the switch out, the old switcheroo between Biden and Harris?
Well, I think from the Democrat point of view, they had to do something because Biden was going to lose. Kamala Harris, as y'all been saying, it was terrible as a district attorney. I know the Democrats tend to rely on ID poll, and it could probably get them more votes. And it gives her the opportunity to choose a vice presidential candidate that might be more in line with the base of the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic Party is a capitalist party, so I was a Democrat for years. I'm not going to lie. I came over about a little over a decade ago, and they have the ability. Their main problem is the fact that the leadership and the donor class of the party is pretty far to the right of their base, and that's why they can snatch a defeat from the jaws of victory 9 times out of 10. And I'm interested to see who she picks as her vice presidential candidate. Not that I'm interested, not that I think that it'll be a good candidate, but if they go with Shapiro, then they're going to lose Michigan. Because if they pick somebody that is a straight up Zionist, I think that they are going to lose a lot of votes that way. I think that potentially they could do better, but I just don't have a lot of faith in the Democratic Party on the local level, on the state level, or on the national level. They've just been very, very disappointing, and and they're capitalists, which is very bad. But the one thing to bear in mind when people think of the Democrats as the lesser of evils, and I would say they are to the slight relative left of the modern Republican Party, but like y'all had said earlier, Bill Clinton decided to triangulate and to keep following to the right has just pulled the party to the right and out of touch with its own base. But just bear in mind that this is the same party that led the only successful coup in North Carolina when they had their with the Wilmington massacre and the coup that happened as part of that, and they took the state government over from the farmers and the Republicans, who were at the time were 99% black. And this is the party that held power in North Carolina for 100 years. And they were responsible for the Jim Crow laws in North Carolina, and they were responsible for the eugenics program that Adolf Hitler looked to for inspiration. And people say, well, Josh, but civil rights, they flipped because of Johnson and all that, and all the Republicans, all the racists went to the Republican Party. Be that as it may, they didn't stop the eugenics program in North Carolina until 1973, and they were still in charge. So when it comes to what we think today of the Democrats as the kinder, gentler fascists, the left wing of the fascist animal, just bear in mind that they might speak better now, but what they did back then has no bearing on the party today, which I'd say some of which is correct, but some of which isn't. Like, they still maintained the eugenics program for 6 years after the Civil Rights Act. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. As I said, I was a Democrat for many, many years. I was part of the state the CC for a little while. I was, part of the district, part of the district group, and then I just couldn't take it anymore, because when it comes down to it, you can't just say nice things about working people and then focus all your attention on a vanishing middle class that generally just helps the wealthy. You actually have to put the workers first, because the workers are the ones that create the value. And I'm rambling, so I will shut up.
Let me add one thing that, Democratic Party may be the oldest active political party, and they have a storied and very troubled history, both. There were some very good politicians that were associated with the Democratic Party, and there were some very bad politicians that were associated with the Democratic Party. And I suppose even the Republican Party had their share of goods and bads too. But the fact is that right now, in this year, 2024, it's the Democratic Party who has millions and millions and millions of dollars in a concerted effort to keep third party and minor party candidates off the ballot, because they don't want anyone to challenge their candidate. Now, as this whole transition was going on, and Kamala Harris was getting named president nominee for the Democratic Party and all this other stuff, There were so many people who were saying, well, we don't want Biden to resign because what about the 14 million people that voted for Biden in the primaries? And I looked at that. I listened to that like a dozen times. I'm like, what primaries? Like, how? Like, yeah, they had like some kind of paper candidate that was running against Biden in like primaries, but half of the states canceled their primaries or didn't hold their primaries, and they just inaugurated Biden as the president. So, I mean, tell me how that was democratic. Like, the Democratic Party says that they're fighting for democracy and they're working for democracy and they're working to protect and defend democracy, and yet they're the ones that are like sponsoring like millions and millions of dollars and legal challenges and creating all kinds of weird like hurdles for ballot access across the country. They're like the least democratic party that I can think of. So I think that the name Democrat is sort of a misnomer because they're certainly not interested in any kind of formal democracy or substantive democracy. Excuse me. They're certainly interested in maybe the appearance of a democratic vote, if you want to claim that it's that, where you get, a choice between, two things that are basically the same. That's not real democracy, because democracy means the people rule, and simply electing one of two equally or identical options is not a real substantive choice. But that's what the Democratic Party is doing. So we don't even have to go back to eugenics or the Civil War or the Klan or anything like that, or Strom Thurmond when he was a Democrat, or George Wallace when he was a Democrat. We don't have to go back that far. We can look right this year to see what the Democratic Party is doing to basically take anyone who is challenging their guy from the left and get rid of them. And there's some reports about RFK and things like that, but whether or not those guys are getting help from the Republican Party, the fact is the Democrats have been going after any third party options, with the exception, I will say, of the Socialist Party, because we are not on a lot of Democratic Party radars, which is a blessing in disguise, I suppose. We're not being sued into the ground, but every time a third party candidate may get ballot access, there's going to be some Democratic lawyer there to stop that, to challenge every single signature, and to fight every single step of the way to keep anybody else off the ballot. And that includes in the Democratic Party's own primary process that happened in the spring that was supposedly so democratic that selected Biden.
Yeah, and it's been tough with the campaign, because I've been doing this a while, and this is definitely the worst it's been as far as ballot access. And you have to ask, like, at what point is it even worth it when we have, because we have so many challenges when they can raise tens of millions of dollars at the lift without lifting a finger. It's just there for them to use. So they have networks of staff that they can call up, and teams of lawyers. We have to take on all that and try. Almost all our energy just goes to getting on the ballot. No matter how hard we fight, we just they know this. That's why they do it. And it's like, at what point do we even bother trying to get on the ballot? Because we know they're putting up those hurdles specifically to stop us. But I don't know. I think it is important to talk about it, because most people kind of just assume that, if you have a party, you get on the ballot, and unless you actually work in this field, you don't realize how difficult it is and how rigged it is. And I've been petitioning every weekend all summer. It's my birthday weekend this weekend, and that's what I'm going to be doing on my birthday weekend. Is I'm going to be out in the sun asking for signatures all weekend. And if you're in Minnesota and want to help me, you should come down. But everyone I've talked to, there's been a few people that say, I'm worried about this because I don't want Trump to win. I'm in Minneapolis. It's very liberal here. But everyone agrees that we need more choices on the ballot. We need more than two parties. We need more choices as far as policy, because like last time we were here, we were talking about how the question they asked at the debate was, why should corporations and the wealthy pay less taxes, and why that was a good thing. Not if they should, but why. And that's what we've gotten to. It's not whether or not we should be capitalists. It's what form of capitalism we should have. And that's not democracy. They've already made the choice for us. And I'm going to go get another seltzer, but I am listening.
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay. Thanks, comrades. The Idaho Department of Propaganda, and they'll tell everyone they're throwing their vote away and voting for Trump if you vote third party, which isn't entirely wrong. I would say that is entirely wrong. We do have to break the two-party system, but if we live in a democratic state, we ought to have the ability to represent us. So Eugene Debs once said that I would rather vote for what I wanted and not get it than vote for what I don't want and get it. You know, like I hear the arguments and Trump is terrible. Of course, Trump is terrible, and there's always going to be a Trump because little Bush shrub was terrible, right? Like and the Democrats have gotten into the thing where they get closer to the right because they're going after this unbelievably small majority or group of people that are referred to as moderate Democrats. There are probably more real Sasquatch sightings in the United States than there are actually these mythical unicorn moderate Republicans. But you have to have a real choice. And if we're down to two choices, that aren't really that much different, then a lot of people that would vote third party just wouldn't vote, right? Like when the Green Party got the signatures and spent a ton of money to get the signatures and spent tons of hours getting signatures in North Carolina in 2022, the Democratic Party decided to prevent them from getting on the ballot. And they decided, and the Green Party had to take them to court to get back on the ballot. But the balloting process in itself costs so much money and time and effort that once you've done and got over that hurdle, then you don't have much money or energy to actually campaign. And if you spend your entire campaign just trying to fight to stay on the ballot, it takes away from the real issues and the real, opportunities to discuss your platform with the people that's aiming on, which if in the case of socialists, whether they're eco-socialists or whatever socialist, is the working class. So it's just really important that when people tell you that you're throwing your vote away and you can't run against the Democrats because you're going to spoil them. No. Well, I'm voting for who I want to vote for, right? I'm voting for who will represent me. And if that option isn't there, I'm going to go and I'm not going to check either one, because if you vote for evil, if you vote for the lesser of evil, you're still voting for evil. And this concept of voting for the lesser of evils has been going on for a long time, because it's the only way the Democrats know how to campaign is the other guy is worse. It's made it shifted the Overton window straight up to evil. So it's important when people tell you that you're a spoiler to be like, I'm not going to vote for Trump, but I'm not going to vote for Harris or Biden or whoever the Democrats put up, because the Democrats aren't going to do anything to make life better for workers. Over.
I'll take this opportunity to kick a little bit of political science down. That's just my wheelhouse. There is an idea of the median voter theorem in political science, and any political scientists worth their salt should know this, but it's a revelation to a lot of people who don't spend their life in the political science department, unlike myself. Basically, the median voter theorem says that in any election, since we have a two-party election, two-party system, and our two-party system is actually structurally almost guaranteed because of other things. There's the way the system is set up, it basically tends toward two parties and only two parties ever. But because we have a two-party first past the post system where winner take all, the vast majority of the voters are in the very center of the ideological distribution from left to right. Out to the wings where we're sitting at, there's not very many voters. And we see that in our membership too. If we took all of the socialists and put them all together, we might be able to fill a convention hall at a hotel or something like that in a city somewhere. There's not very many people out on the far left. There's really not that many people on the far right either, believe it or not. I know that it seems like, the forces of brown shirt fascism are on the march and will be able to occupy this entire country in one fell swoop, but there's really not that many people that are willing to actually fight for what they really believe on the far right. There's just a lot of people that are cosplaying, doing a lot of Facebook and Twitter stuff, or Truth Social stuff. There's like, if you actually told those guys to defend their position, a lot of them would go home. That's a positive thing, but on the negative side of it, most of the people are in the very center of the distribution. What the median voter theorem says, that in that situation, because we have a first past the post, winner take all system, all you need to do is get the median voter, like the voter in the middle of that distribution, whoever that happens to be, whatever their position happens to be. So if you can position your party so that if in the Democrat Party's case, the right wing of their party captures just that median voter, but not any further, you win the election. Now, you don't want to move too far to the right because you shear off a huge chunk of your left wing, which the Democratic Party has seemed to be very, very willing to do. And as the Republican Party moves right, this is backwards in my view, as the Republican Party moves right, that moves where the median voter is. So the Democratic Party now feels free to move right as well. The Democratic Party is basically sitting over the right side of that huge distribution in the middle of the political spectrum. So their left wing is where their right wing used to be, because the Republicans have moved so far to the right that they've sacrificed the middle. So in places like Wyoming, Republicans do really well. And because of the crazy math in the House of Representatives, the Republican Party is overrepresented because of the way that Wyoming gets one whole vote and California gets 56 votes. California is like 90 times or 100, 200 times as big as Wyoming, or whatever the number is. They should have way more representation, but they don't, because the way the math is calculated. But at any rate, if they can get enough of those small little rinky-dink states like Wyoming or South Dakota or North Dakota or whatever, they can control the House of Representatives, or the Senate, even though they don't have the majority of the vote. And the Republican Party don't have the majority of the vote. They never will have the majority of the vote because their ideas are repulsive to the majority of the people. But because they've moved so far to the right, the Democrats have decided that the median voter is somewhere on the right side of the political spectrum. So they put their political position right over that person, whoever that person happens to be, and capture that person in the election. And all they care about is getting 50% plus one in their elections. They don't care about expanding their base. They don't care about like coming up with progressive ideas or anything like that. So that leaves the whole left wing of the political spectrum completely and totally abandoned. And it's filled with people like Greens. It's filled with people like the Socialist Party or the PSL, or people like Cornel West, or any number of other candidates. And we will fight over a very, very tiny segment of the voting population on the far left. But the fact is that we are completely unrepresented over here. We're absolutely, because the Democrats have made a calculation that they can sacrifice everyone to the left of, say, AOC. They can just completely sacrifice them, because where else are we going to go? That's what Lawrence O'Donnell, the former speechwriter and also the director of the West Wing, or the producer of the West Wing, said, where is the left wing going to go? When we have a choice in the election, we can either choose to write in a person like a socialist, or maybe if the socialists were able to get on the ballot in that state or whatever, we may be able to vote for them in that state, or we can vote for Joe Biden because we've been told, or Kamala Harris now, because we've been told that we're wasting our vote, if we don't. But another fact is that while the Democratic Party only goes for 50% plus one, they have instant ballot access. Like, where we have to spend thousands of dollars, or in some cases millions and millions of dollars to mount a failed campaign to get on a ballot in the state of New York, like the Greens did this year. They just get grandfathered in. They just get let on. For what? For what purpose? They don't have to spend any of their $100 million that Kamala Harris raised in 48 hours after naming herself the presidential candidate. She raised $100 million. Now, if you look at our bank account, it's considerably less than that. So how is it that she has no barriers in her way, and yet we have all of the barriers, and yet we have no money, and she has all of the money? Like, the system is set up to prevent people like us from ever even seeing the light of day, let alone having a realistic chance of getting elected.
Well, and it's ridiculous that we're spending that kind of money on campaigns when there's people that are hungry and homeless. It is just such a waste. But that's where the money is going to go. And I wanted to point out that so the Democrats definitely do their part to keep us off the ballot, and they do this. And they supported Citizens United, despite the fact that at the end of the day, the Republicans are probably going to benefit from that more than the Democrats will. Not because the Democrats aren't just as pro-corporate, but the Democrats tend to be less enthusiastic as far as their willingness to deregulate. I mean, they'll still do it, but it might take a little more donation. So ultimately, corporations are probably, given the choice, they're probably going to give Republicans more money in that situation, especially like oil companies and the big donors. They didn't stop that. They didn't stop gerrymandering, which definitely has hurt Democrats, because it takes a lot more votes just to get a Democrat into office than Republicans. And even with ballot access, the Libertarian Party, especially the Libertarian Party today, which has gone off the rails far to the right, gets the most votes of any third party. And they also have a little more ballot access, to be fair, but restricting ballot access doesn't necessarily hurt just the right or just the left. But if the Libertarians are your challenger, it's probably going to steal more votes from Republicans, steal more votes. I don't really mean that, obviously. Who you vote for is who you vote for. No one owns your vote or is owed your vote. But that's the way they view it. So they are opposed to democracy and opening up elections, even though it hurts them, which should tell you something about where their values are and why they're so hypocritical. Because ultimately, they're for neoliberalism and they're for the owning classes, and they would rather have someone like Trump than a communist anytime. And they'll even tell you this if you ask them. So just it shows you where they really stand. And I always say, look at what they do, not what they say, because when you look at what they do, their legislative record, it's very different from what they campaign on. Josh was on staff.
Yeah, comrades, and there's something that we on the left, or we everywhere, not just on the left, we need to push for is the public funding of elections, right? We need to send out, first of all, ballot access needs to be made a whole lot easier or equitable, right? But publicly funding elections to where, because if all the voters are presented a list of candidates and what they believe and a history of what they've done, they'll have a better tools to vote. And maybe this is, since I'm running a local, it's kind of a big thing for me because here in Raleigh, the Democrats operate it like a partisan race, even though it's not a partisan race for their city council. But I think that if you had publicly funded elections where you have a list of the candidates and what they believe in and what they say they're going to do, and you send that out to everybody, cut out the campaigning, people will tell you what they want to do, right? People will tell you 100% what they're about. Like Donald Trump tells you all the time, 16 times a day, angrily sometimes, and angrily not sometimes. And the Democrats might use flowery words, but if you look at their history and their record, it's not as different as you would think it would be. One thing that I think would be good for the country would be publicly funding campaigns where you get a list of all the candidates, what their statements, what they believe in, and then no campaigning. You just push the same thing out all the time if people want to read it. That's just me, though. Over.
Not only would that work, I can guarantee you it would work, because we did it here in Minneapolis 3 times. We beat the Democrats 3 times in a row because we ran candidates that listened to their communities, that saw what they cared about, that ran on those issues, and they beat the Democrats. They even outraised the Democrats when it came to campaign funding. So we can do this. Democracy does definitely work. And that's one thing I want to make clear, that we may have a broken system, but it is not beyond repair. because what the far right especially wants to do is to convince everyone that, democracy just doesn't work. We might as well just have a tyrant. And that is definitely not the way we want to go. We need more democracy, not less. And what's broken about our system is that we don't have enough democracy, not just politically, but especially economically, both, but economically especially, because under capitalism, your workplace is run like a dictatorship by your boss. It's not democratic. And we want to get people thinking about what that would look like. What would a democratic workplace look like? What would a democratically controlled economy look like? Not Democrat as in the party, but democracy.
I also think it's important to remember that there are different kinds of democracy, and this is something I really stress. I think that the form of democracy that we have right now is the symptom of the broken system, where we think that democracy is literally just us going and casting our votes. Democracy is actually activism in the community. Democracy is getting down and making change. Democracy is working with labor unions. Democracy is organizing a city improvement project or something like this, like a city public gardens project. Democracy is actually taking control of your life and running it for the benefit of yourself and for your community. It's not simply voting. That's not all democracy is. I know that our government wants us to think that that's what democracy is, and so therefore we should limit our actions to just campaign time and stuff like that. But democracy is what the Socialist Party, I think, is going to try to pivot toward after this election, starting to get ballot access drives going 4 years in advance, starting to begin identifying individuals who would be willing to do that and work to get us on the ballot in some of these states, rather than just putting it all within a year or half a year before the election. Democracy is also getting people educated about what socialism is and what socialism can do and what you can do under socialism. That's actually people taking power. That's actually people running their lives. Democracy means people rule. When you create these various parallel organizations, and this is a guerrilla war tactic, when you create parallel organizations to the ones that are run by the corrupt forces, or as Che would say, the dictatorship or the tyranny, when you create your parallel organizations that the people run, then the people are in a position to take over when that whole other system falls apart. But right now, when we think of democracy just as voting, when we think of it just in the milieu of elections or ballot access or any of that stuff, we're actually playing the capitalist game. And as AOC or Bernie will demonstrate very aptly, that's a losing game, because you can't be a socialist in that system. That system will recreate itself in your life and in your thinking. So AOC may be very serious about what she believed, but the first thing she did when she got into power was endorse Nancy Pelosi, because that's what the system required her to do. And as she mentioned very clearly, the system required her to spend her first year of her first 2 years fundraising for her next election, and then her second year actually running her next election. It doesn't really matter what AOC really believed, because at the end of the day, she was just like any other Democratic politician. And so it's really important to remember, yes, Stephanie, on the local level, you can do stuff. On the national level, we're definitely not going to change it, because the oligarchy is entirely too strong. When you don't have the same kind of pressures like we do at running for president, it might be that you can utilize that time and that energy to get something done. But if we really want to change this country, we have to start not only at the local or the county level or wherever we're at, but also we have to start working outside of the system to actually give people not only the ability to control the things around them, to set policies that influence and improve their life, but also teaching them how to take power in other areas, not just the electoral system. And when I write my book about this campaign someday, I don't have a book deal right now, but when I write my book about this campaign, that's one of the things I really want to highlight, that the money itself, when you play the Democratic Party's game or the oligarchy's game, the duopolies game, whatever, when you play that game, you're going to lose. Because if you're not on the ballot in 50 states, you don't have a chance in hell of winning. And the Democratic Party will make sure that you don't get on the ballot in all 50 states if you're running as a socialist. Guaranteed 100%. And so we need to start thinking about other ways that people can rule and people can govern their own lives, rather than just through the two-party electoral system. And then when we have a system that's capable of supplanting that two-party system, that system will fall apart. We don't owe any kind of, allegiance to that system in the first place. We'll just let it fall, and our system will be there to take its place. We're not there right now. That's something we got to do to build, but that's also part of what this campaign is about, to start looking forward to the day when there are, other options for people rather than just voting, which is, even Thomas Jefferson said, that's the least you can possibly do for the health of your democracy.
Hey, comrades, right quick. Donald in the chat said a good way to start is to organizing your workplace. And I think organization of workplace is very important. As socialists, that's one of the reasons why we say that socialism is radical democracy, because the United States, you'll have tons of people saying, but we're the freest country in the world, or we're a free country. But when you think about that, you spend most of your life, especially in the United States, because we work more than pretty much anybody else in the world with a population our size. We spend more time at work. And while we're at work, it's generally not a democratic organization. We do what the bosses tell us within the confines of what benefits the company. If we organize and we unionize our workplaces, that brings democracy to work. And we spend more of our waking time at work. Not all of us, but some of us spend far more at work than we do with our families, than we do asleep. I mean, in the United States, the reality of the situation, if you are a worker in the United States and you're even, in order to keep your head barely above the water, you have to work a lot. And then still, it doesn't matter, because productivity keeps increasing and wages haven't been connected to productivity in years. But if we, as the workers, the ones that create the value, I mean, there is no investor that is responsible for creating the value, right? Because they don't do the work. Without workers, you got nothing. You've got no. Without workers, nothing gets done, right? If you have the person who owns the restaurant, if he works there, that's great. Or she works there, that's great. Or they work there, that's great. But when it comes down to it, unless they are doing it themselves, it's not possible, right? Like, we need to benefit from the value that our work creates. We are not natural resources. We are the people that make the value. And when we realize that, when the working class as a whole realizes that and say, wait a minute here, like, without us, y'all aren't making any money. So you need to give us, I would say, our entire value, then, we're not going to, we're never going to get out of the situation we're in, which is spiraling for the working class. It's spiraling downwards and downwards. So it's important that we, as workers, when possible, get together with our coworkers and just sit down and break all the taboos. It's not illegal to tell anybody how much you get paid at work. It's just not. It's not illegal to do it. And if everybody knows how much everybody gets paid at work, everybody can know what the minimum should be. Like, if the person that does the most of the work is getting paid the less, that's a problem, because the way our wage system works is they are paying you literally the least amount that they can get away with paying you. And we need to change that. And Stephanie, you wanted to talk about like the Teamsters guy at the RNC. Over.
Did anyone else see that?
I didn't.
Yes, I did. I did see that.
Okay.
It was.
Do you want me to open it up, Stephanie?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not trying to step on you. I just noticed that you mentioned you don't really know how to start it, but basically, if you guys didn't see it, okay, this guy, he looked like Mr. Clean. Well, he's the president of the Teamsters, and I used to be a Teamster. Full disclosure, I used to be a member of the Teamster union.
Didn't know
When I was,
that.
yeah, when I was a bus driver, I was a Teamster.
Oh yeah.
And interestingly enough, by the way, our shop steward was a full-on Trumpist, just an absolute 100% Trumpist. And he's like, yeah, I totally support Donald Trump, and yet these MFs, like, managers are going to kill us all, and we need to fight for better wages and everything like that. I'm like, don't you see that there's a contradiction between those two things? He's like, no, there's no contradiction whatsoever. I'm full-on for workers, and I'm absolutely against immigrants. And I'm like, okay, but first of all, whatever. But I don't even want to argue with that with him. But anyway, so I kind of understand where this dude is coming from. And every single thing he said was right. I'll just say this. Every single thing the guy said was correct. Corporations are running this country into the ground. Corporations are killing workers. We need to fight against right to work in every single state where it exists. Absolutely 100%. We need more unions in this country. 100%. The workers have gotten shafted by this system. The corporate elites are in control of our government. Like, right down the list, every single thing he said was right. And my initial thought was, while I was listening to this guy speak, I'm like, first of all, nobody in the crowd knows what this dude is even talking about. Like, they're listening to him going, oh, man, what the hell is this communist doing here? Like, who let this guy into the building? Like, you could hear, like, there's a couple people that were clapping. Maybe there was a couple people like, yeah, I got screwed out of my job at the steel mill 30 years ago, and now I want some fucking revenge, But for the most part, if you looked out over the crowd, it was like one of the, like, lowest energy speeches of the whole thing. Like, everybody was like crazy gung-ho except for this dude. He was like really on fire, but nobody was responding to it. So I think that they kind of like were wondering why he was invited to speak there. I think that's what the RNC was. But then, as I mentioned it, and Stephanie, you can talk more about this, but you said something really valuable to me. It's like, yeah, those people don't believe any of that stuff. They're just like fucking co-opting the workers. They're getting that guy up there. He's the guy. He's the guy that the propagandists need from the other side, that will come to your thing and say your thing for you, but from the other side. And the analogy in my head popped like Tokyo Rose, the propagandist from World War II who spoke. She was an American, I believe, an American or a British person, one of the two. But she would give like pro-Japanese propaganda during World War II. Like, you American Navy sailors or whatever, you guys are going to be bombed. You might as well just surrender now. Listen to Tokyo Rose. Listen to us. We're just your friends. We just want to be your friends. But it's your American overlords who are using you in this war, to basically, get you killed because they hate you. The Japanese government loves you and will treat you really well when you surrender. Like, it's like the propagandist that the propagandist needs someone from the other side to come over and say. That's why it was so important for them to like half the people. Number one, this is nothing but like there are black people that like Trump, but it was really important for them to say, I was a former Democrat. I'm off the plantation now. I was a former Democrat, but now I'm totally on board with Trump. Like, what was her name? The actress. What was her name?
Jane Fonda?
No. At this convention, she has no hair. Has very short.
No, she's a OnlyFans model. Actually, I think I know who you're talking about, but she's not an actress. She's an OnlyFans model.
Okay, well, whatever she does, she's a famous person. Anyway, it was very important for her to go. I was fully a Democrat, and then I listened to my father, who said, when I told him I think Trump is racist, my father said, prove it. And I looked through all of Trump's speeches, and by the time I got down to the bottom of Trump's speeches, I didn't have one piece of evidence that Donald Trump was racist. And so guess what? I put on the red hat too, just like my father. It's very important for them to have people like that on there. And I could see through it with her. But when the guy from the Teamsters came on there, I was a little bit blinded to it until you mentioned that, Stephanie. It's very important that they have the guy saying the thing, but from the other side, but now still in support of your side, because that gets everybody who might be a worker, who might be a right winger at the same time, but also is a worker and is also pro-union to be like, okay, it's all right for me to like Trump too. that guy, the head of the Teamsters, supports Trump, it's okay for me to like him too. And that's really what happened there, Stephanie.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to say, it ultimately, the Democrats have been the party of unionism supposedly for a while now. And I don't honestly see it as all that different as when the Teamsters go speak there. It's just that the Democrats actually have some motivation to pass these things. And of course, he was talking about, I think Josh Hawley was on a picket line for a photo op, and I think he voted their way in one vote, although like 200 Democrats did and like 3 Republicans did. And what he was right about, Hawley really did grill that Boeing CEO. And I don't think it was because he really cared. I just think he saw it as a great opportunity. But it was nice to see, and there's no reason the Democrats couldn't be doing this. But yeah, ultimately, it's pure propaganda. And what I'm seeing is, I think their strategy, of course, they're doing the whole mass deportation thing. They want to garner union support, and they're gonna play this as immigrants are stealing your jobs. Because the scariest thing to the owning classes is immigrants and union members and all working people actually realizing that we're being screwed over by one group of people. It's the handful of people that control, I think, about more than half the world's wealth now. And they're the ones that are killing our oceans and paying us low wages. And they're the ones buying up all the housing stock. And they're the ones monopolizing. And they're the ones, they are the ones in power. And when you're in power, you need a scapegoat to blame for all your mistakes. So that's what I think they're going to try to do. And that's why they're centering immigration. Another reason is with climate change, we are going to see a lot of mass migration. And they're trying to get out ahead of this. And they might not need fascism to keep power now, but they know they will in the future, especially when supply chains really do break down, and we're seeing the real effects of climate change here in the US when people are actually going hungry and they don't have water. And there's a heat wave in Phoenix, and they did a study and they expected emergency room visits in the tens of thousands with no power for just a couple days in Phoenix, because they are reliant on air conditioning there. And all the thing, with the aquifer that our agriculture is reliant on in the Great Plains and in I forget the name of the valley in California, where like a quarter of our produce comes from. The water is sinking there so fast that the ground is sinking like inches every year. It's so unsustainable, and these effects will come to us eventually. We can't insulate ourselves forever, and we're going to see migration. So they're getting out ahead of that, and they want to demonize migrants as the problem, and they want unions to be on their side, and they're going to use the low wages that they cause to blame those migrants. And it's the same song. It's always blaming the working people for the actions and the corruption of the owning classes. So that, I think, that is one of their tactics, and that's the thing. The Democrats really haven't done anything substantial to help the working class. They're not going to raise minimum wage. They're going to do the very minimum to protect unions. What did Biden say? With rent, even the thing he proposed was so it wouldn't even keep up with inflation. He said it wrong, but he read its teleprompter wrong. But even if he did it, which he won't, well, and not just because he isn't going to be elected now, but Harris won't do it either. You notice he's coming out with all these solutions and policies that are popular because, they see that they're hurting their polls, but they have no intention of doing that. And the Republicans are the same in so far as anything they say as far as protecting workers, they're not going to do. But they're not even saying that. They got this guy to say it. And, they can't even bring themselves to cheer for him. I don't feel bad for him, but I think it's pretty transparent what's going on, and it's sad to see that. Unions do have a party. They have the Socialist Party. They have a few parties on the left that do actually, unequivocally support workers' right to organize, except for cops. You know, that is I'm not for cop unions. I want to make that clear, but that is, I mean, cops exist to, their foundation is in the slave patrols and in breaking unions. They are the thugs of the owning classes, and their unions exist to protect them. Like when I saw the cops out in front of the protest outside my door here, it's like, well, I know why they're there, and it's not because they care about genocide. It's because they want to brutalize the protesters. So anyway, in short, that's their pretty barefaced strategy, is to pit one group of working people against another. And the only way we're going to beat them is if we're united, and not just in the US, but we have to have an international movement. Socialism and nationalism don't go together. We have an international working class, and we have to work together internationally. Capitalists do it. They love things like NAFTA and things where capitalism is not constrained by national borders. But workers, they don't want us working together across national borders. They want to keep us as divided as possible. And the Democrats use things like identity politics, addressing real issues like racism and sexism and bigotry. Those are undoubtedly real issues, but they take the class component out and act like it we just need more women to be oppressors, and it's nonsensical. So they will try to divide us, and the only way we're going to win, and we will win, because we do have the power, we just have to realize it, is with solidarity and working together and not playing these games.
It's important to note also that the president of the Teamsters, that Sean O'Brien, I believe is his name, did not offer any solutions at all to any of these problems. He was just doing what so many people do and pointing his finger and saying that's a problem. And like I said, he was right on. And he also mentioned this. He said the Chamber of Commerce is just the owners' union. He said the capitalists have a union. It's really important that workers do too. But he didn't suggest any, like, maybe the workers should take over their shops. Maybe the workers should have a larger, portion of government here. Stephanie, I see you're typing. You can just go ahead and talk.
Oh, I want to hear, because you're absolutely right. The Chamber of Commerce is basically a union of employers, but Joshua in his campaign, and I actually plugged you in my recent TikTok where I talked about J.D. Vance and his taking on the persona of a working class person from Appalachia to get that clout. And I said you were actually an example of not a hillbilly, but like a working class person from Appalachia that actually has the right, in some sense, to carry on that banner of things like Blair Mountain and the fights against the bosses. But you do have a solution or at least an answer to the Chamber of Commerce as the union of the employing class.
Yeah, I can throw it out there. As part of my campaign for Raleigh, I had a theory that, because the Chamber of Commerce is just bad. It's just bad. ALEC and all the associated groups of businesses trying to control policy to make things better for themselves. In North Carolina, we got bumped to number 2 for business this year, but I think we're still at the dead bottom for number 50 for workers. We're like, it's half as good to work in North Carolina as it is in Mississippi. Like, Oxfam just does not think that workers in North Carolina have any or in a good way at all. And they're related. But I had, as part of both of my campaigns so far, and it will be a part of this one, is the idea of setting up a chamber of labor, right? It would be pretty easy to get started in municipalities. We've got space that we could provide for free to meet and have a boss-free, only workers organization that is boss-free, and it would give the opportunity for unions to speak, and it would get the opportunity for workers to talk together and to work together to find solutions to the problems that they are facing. Because let's face it, the people that are members of the Chamber of Commerce don't have as many and definitely not the same challenges as the workers themselves. So if you have a chamber of labor that whatever municipal government or long, whether it's a municipality, whether it's a county, whether it's a parish, however you organize, it's easy to set up, right? Because it just takes space and maybe light administrative stuff, and then you will have a council, a group of people, a pool, an organization that you can actually relate to the elected politicians, what their struggles are. Because right now, the politicians hear from the Chamber of Commerce all the time about how terrible it is to be, an investor and a business owner just because it's so expensive in taxes but workers don't get a seat at the table. And I think if we do something like this and organize them either within or outside the municipal and county governments, it would be an opportunity to be able to get, what the needs of the working class is to the table of the electeds. I'm sorry if that was a rant.
No. And I want to mention that Joshua's campaign has really set the standard as far as what we can do as far as local change. I know he goes to those city council meetings and they're bringing up different policies and they're holding their representatives speak to the fire. You don't need to get elected in order to have an effect. You can, especially locally, you can have an effect on what they're talking about. You can, especially with local newspapers going under at unprecedented rates, we have to hold these people accountable. Pay attention to what's going on locally, because that may be where you have the most effect. Join an organization. We don't just do electoral politics. I want to make that clear. We're a campaign, so that's what we're talking about. Check out the IWW. Check out a different party if you're really not into us, but please join something. Check out our National Organizing Conference. It's coming up this weekend. Check out our Statement of Principles. And of course, check out SPUSA 2024 .org to check out our campaign, because we need you and we can do this. We can absolutely do it. We know that democracy works. We know these solutions work. And these solutions are actually fairly popular. When you don't talk about socialism, you just talk about workplace democracy and extending democracy to the economic level. It is very popular. And these are things that Americans care about. So we can do this, but we can't do it without you. So please join.
Also, while we're plugging things, we can plug our website, SPUSA2024.org. Plus, you guys might be seeing this on our Facebook page. Our YouTube page is all SPUSA2024.org. If you have some time and some energy and would like to volunteer for the campaign, we have 100 days left before the election. And we could really use some help with social media. We could really use some help with money for the last 100 days. Putting like ads up and stuff like that costs money. It all costs money. Everything costs money. You can go to SPUSA2024.org or send us an email at info@SPUSA2024.org. Also, actually, if we want to plug some other things with the party, there is a anti-war and anti-imperialism working group that you can get involved with. We meet every other Monday. There's a women's commission that you can get involved with that Stephanie convenes. There's also a queer commission. There's also an eco-socialist commission, and there's also a labor working group too that we can get involved with to make connections with union activities and things like that. Plus, our state parties are doing a lot of really great stuff. For example, New Jersey is involved right now in an ongoing series of discussion about prison abolition, which is pretty fascinating, and it's been going on for quite a while. And also the Left Unity Study Group, which is just a general leftist kind of group that gets together, reads various left-wing and revolutionary texts and discusses them among comrades. And so you don't have to really know how to read. The discussions are pretty good anyway, and people will rotate in who presents the material for the week, and it's a really good discussion. And right now they're doing a book about the socialist take on the situation in Palestine. So that's another thing. It's leftunitystudy.org. Is it org, Josh?
.com.
Left Unity.
Yeah.
Leftunitystudy.com.
Leftunitystudy.com.
I'll be there tomorrow.
So check that out. We're going to wrap it up. We're coming up on 90 minutes for this live stream. Do we have any parting words for our audience before we go? Stephanie?
No, I think I made the pleas. Please, we need your help. You know, we're small but very mighty, and really, please share this. And thank you for your time. We'd love your feedback.
Josh?
Yeah, I would just say revolution in our lifetimes, comrades. And I would also say, like Stephanie said, join an org. If you don't join ours, that's okay. We'd love to have you, but definitely join an org because you're more powerful in groups. And, working together, we can make a change. Thank you.
How can they find out more about your campaign for the City Council in Raleigh?
Yeah, if you go to, it's long, but it's bradleyforraleighworkers.com.
Is that 4 as in the number?
Nope. That is 4 as in the word. I'm too old to even think of that. We're on Instagram at Bradley #4 Raleigh, and I think Twitter is Bradley for Raleigh too, and then Facebook at Bradley for Raleigh Workers.
Very good. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for coming and watching us and talking back with us and carrying on the conversation in the chat. All of those chat comments will be posted right along with the video, and this video will be up on Facebook. It will be up on YouTube very soon, as soon as they send it up, and we'll let you know when the next one, probably in the next couple of weeks, when we do the next one. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Solidarity. Oh, Stephanie just